Coming up on a special edition of Impact. In the midst of an alarming winter in Montana, Northwestern Energy's 2022 climate vision is getting fresh scrutiny.
There are no carbon reductions, and that's a real problem.
We're well ahead of the game, and I just don't feel like that's portrayed very well here in the media in the state.
That's next on Impact.
Production of Impact is made possible with support from the Otto Bremer Trust, investing in people, places, and opportunities in our region. Online at ottobremer.org. The Greater Montana Foundation, encouraging communication on issues, trends, and values of importance to Montanans. And viewers like you who are friends of Montana PBS. Thank you.
Welcome to Impact, our news and public affairs series exploring issues important to you. I'm Anna Rao. More and more, Northwestern Energy is finding itself between a rock and a hard place. As pressure mounts for the monopoly utility to address carbon emissions, it's also trying to balance the needs of shareholders with the rates it charges customers. Montana PBS's Stan Parker and I teamed up for this half-hour special that examines the trade-offs and their implications for our changing climate.
Dr. Steve Running is Montana's resident expert on climate change. He also happens to be a world expert. He started with a team at NASA in the 1980s, and by 2007 he was part of the United Nations Nobel Prize-winning team known as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The IPCC had gathered enough evidence over decades to show that the world is warming and greenhouse gases are to blame.
We had this naive expectation that when we as scientists pointed out what was going on, everybody would get real quick, and the politicians had to line up at our door to ask what needs to be done. And here we sit 20 years later, and some things are going, but everybody widely agrees not nearly the pace that's needed.
A 2017 climate assessment done by researchers at Montana universities explains just how much the climate has already changed here in Montana. They say between 1950 and 2017, average temperatures have risen 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit and could reach nearly 10 degrees by the end of the century if emissions hold steady. One effect will be more extreme weather. On balance, the Treasure State will heat up and dry out, despite more spring flooding events.
It isn't the temperature alone or the rain snowfall alone, it's the net result of water balance of the system. Inputs and outgo, just like your checking account. And when you look at that, the evaporation rate is increasing faster than any rain or snowfall is. So we're on net getting drier, aridifying bit by bit across the state, except for the very eastern corner.
The IPCC has urged countries to make immediate, steep, dramatic cuts to greenhouse gas emissions to limit warming. They hope to hold the line at 2 degrees Celsius at the absolute worst, but the panel says even that will likely push the Earth beyond repair, and that 1.5 degrees would be far better. The world has already warmed about 1 degree since pre-industrial times. Making electricity is the second biggest source of emissions in the U.S. behind transportation, which means electric utilities have a central role to play. How concerned are you with the risks of climate change?
We see it in Montana. Our fire season has expanded dramatically. It used to be a Memorial Day to Labor Day thing, and we've had fires in December, and it's something we take extremely serious.
Brian Bird is the president and CEO of Northwestern Energy, Montana's largest electric utility. He joined as chief financial officer in 2003 to guide the company out of bankruptcy and has been there ever since. As urgency about climate change mounted, the company got pressure from shareholders to take action.
We think over time we were doing the right things, but we had stakeholders to say, hey, you don't have a plan.
In March 2022, Bird announced the utility's roadmap to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. The company touted that its portfolio already had 56% carbon-free sources, which is better than the industry average. Yet it still plans to keep burning coal for power until the 2040s. The document has been controversial from the start.
I have to say I find it, what's the right word here? Disappointing.
Longtime lawmaker and Billings resident Mary McNally knows a little about the electricity industry. She served on energy committees in the House and Senate for 12 years.
I think they're trying to make the case that they do care and that they plan on doing something about it, but the devil's in the details.
She's disappointed steep emission cuts are still decades away. In the meantime, Northwestern plans to take incremental steps like efficiency measures, fixing gas line leaks, electrifying their fleet of cars, and installing smart meters to help manage customer demand.
On your side of the meter, you're going to have information. Ultimately, we need to do a better job of rolling out that technology to you. Get you the meter now, but now we got to get you better technology that on a daily basis you can know how your appliances are operating, what you can do to improve your energy efficiency.
The company says new technologies will displace carbon-intensive generation eventually, but won't be ready to stop adding fossil fuel resources until 2035. For what's left of emissions after 2050, they plan to buy carbon offsets.
One thing I notice with the plan is it seems like there's a bit of kind of a wait and see. There's a lot of placeholders for resources yet to be developed.
Yeah, but the reason it's a bit of a wait and see, it's these dispatchable long duration resources that aren't yet developed. We're going to get there, but honestly, it is going to take time.
Bird sees potential in small modular nuclear reactors, hydrogen, and better storage. But for now, he says fossil fuels make up for the fact that wind and solar are intermittent resources.
And when the wind's blowing and the sun's shining, we actually have more energy than we need. And we can sell that excess energy into the marketplace and provide that benefit to our customers. But on those days when it's not, I'm sure glad we have our fossil fuel resources. Every one of these resources has their pros and cons. But the one I'd say the best is hydro, because it's clean and it's reliable. That's my favorite.
McNally and other critics look at bold steps taken by other utilities to cut carbon and want to see more of that.
Till Colstrip is shut down, there are no, that I can see in here, there are no carbon reductions. And that's a real problem. I mean, so it's not that they're not sincere, but I don't see a roadmap for really getting there, and I just see more carbon.
The net zero vision shows Northwestern expects its greenhouse gas emissions to gradually increase until 2030 before starting to come down. Driving these emissions will be the company's new 175 megawatt gas-fired Yellowstone County generating station, which will come online in 2024. In 2026, it will double its ownership of Colstrip Units 3 and 4, adding 222 megawatts at no purchase cost. Natural gas plants emit about half the carbon that coal plants do.
I'm, I guess, a world expert on the global carbon cycle, and the worst thing humanity is doing right now is burning coal for electric power. And I state that worldwide, it's the highest single carbon emission point of everything humanity does. It's still going up in Southeast Asia, China, India, Indonesia. And every time I look at the annual global carbon budget report and just shows coal emissions just continuing to go like this, and I just think, we're not going to get out of this. We, the great we of humanity, is not going to get out of this until absolutely number one, we quit burning coal.
Northwestern says it plans to keep the coal burning in Colstrip until 2042.
By then, we will have easily blown past 1.5 degrees. We'll have blown past 2 degrees, and it's really too late.
They're saying that limiting warming to 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees involves rapid, deep, and in most cases immediate greenhouse gas emissions. Yep. Is Northwestern on board with this assessment? And if so, how does that square with another couple of decades of burning coal in Colstrip?
Yeah, I would tell you this. You know from our plan, we're more in line with the 2 degree, not the 1.5 degree. I think it's more realistic in terms of the time period of what we're trying to accomplish. And again, it's nice to think about what ideally 1.5, but from a technology standpoint, our ability to get there, we think that 2 degree makes more sense.
It sounds like someone could hear that and think it sounds like you're resigned to letting the worst effects of global warming happen.
Well, I could take that point of view, of course. My view is, again, balancing reliability, affordability, and sustainability. I'm not going to make everybody happy.
Greenhouse gases are a global problem. One utility won't solve climate change by itself, which is where international agreements and industry rules come into play. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is adding more pressure on coal, proposing regulations that would make Colstrip install costly mercury controls and require any coal plant operating after 2039 to capture and sequester 90% of the carbon.
I'm struggling with what EPA is trying to do, and I understand their intentions are good. I truly do. But from a serving our customer standpoint, in a period of time that we're trying to electrify everything, you're trying to shut down resources, the math doesn't work. They're saying we're going to close 30 gigawatts of coal in 2020 down to 10 in 2030. How can I do both of these things? Like electrify this industry with fewer resources to do it. And again, intermittent resources don't close that gap. And so we just need policies that are realistic, not what people want to hear, but what are actually achievable with time and technology. I want to build the new bridge to get to something cleaner, but I'm not going to tear down the old bridge until the new bridge is built.
When does that bridge end? 2035, 2043, 2050? Climate scientists are saying that we're like at a pivotal point now. So they want to continue doing what they're doing for at least the next 20 years. If this is a crisis, does that make any sense at all?
Helena attorney Michael Uda is a green energy lawyer who represents mostly small renewable projects that want to sell their power to the utility. He thinks that bridge to the future is here already.
The installed cost of building renewables, solar and wind, has dropped dramatically. It is now cheaper to use renewables to serve load than it is fossil fuels.
When you look at the price per megawatt hour of different sources, renewables have been cheaper for a while. It varies by year, but take 2016-2017, for example. The Montana Consumer Council, a lawyer appointed by the legislature to represent ratepayers, found that Colstrip was the most expensive in the portfolio at $74 per megawatt hour. Renewables varied between about $30 and $60 per megawatt hour. As for Northwestern's new gas plant, the company didn't give us numbers, but an expert witness hired by the Uda law firm told the Public Service Commission his estimate was $184.21 per megawatt hour, which is in line with the normal range for gas peaking plants. That cost has yet to be added to ratepayers' bills, and customers are already angry about the steep rate increase the Commission just approved. So yes, renewables are cheaper by some metrics, but Northwestern argues intermittency is still the kicker. Comparing wind with the new gas plant, the utility argues they'd have to spend 6 times as much money on wind to achieve the same effective load carrying capacity. And Bird points out the most expensive power of all is the power bought last minute on the open market.
December of 22, when we had 4 days of no wind, and I paid $900 a megawatt hour for a day. What I worry about is when that becomes more than $900 a megawatt, or I can't get it at all. So what happened this year? 4 days in a row of approximately $900. And I'm worried still that I might not even get it. And can you imagine being the CEO of a company if you can't provide electricity to your customers when it's 45 below? It's not something we take lightly.
Those recent 4 days he mentioned were a January cold snap where temperatures plunged to double digits below zero across the state. Critics say those high prices could be avoided by timing market purchases better. They also say grid upgrades can help take advantage of renewable generation in other places. The wind is usually blowing somewhere, they say. And advocates like Uda also argue that fossil fuels impose costs on customers that won't necessarily end up in their bills.
You're paying for environmental cleanups. You're paying for updating the pollution control technology. You're paying for whatever environmental catastrophe ensues. All kinds of collateral consequences. Pretty much none of which renewables impose.
He also says his clients have had an uphill battle with Northwestern.
We would approach Northwestern and we'd say, hey, we have this really cool, hybrid project, batteries and wind, and we're going to use the wind to power the batteries, and then we're going to deliver that power to you at a time when the system needs it most. And they said, not interested. And we had to go to the Montana Public Service Commission and force them to do it. And in a number of cases, the commission said no too. And so we had to go to court.
If you're wondering why these small renewables projects are allowed to force Northwestern to buy their power, it all goes back to a 70s era federal law. The government wanted to encourage a diversified energy supply, so they made monopoly utilities buy power from the upstarts.
The idea is that if you made utilities focus more on buying from others, it would create competition essentially within each utility's customer base, so that the supply was not just dependent upon what choices the utilities made, but there would be alternative avenues to acquire electricity.
Not surprisingly, monopoly utilities fought this arrangement. Further, buying from these small qualifying facilities, or QFs, can hurt Northwestern's bottom line, since the utility only makes money by investing in its own assets. And Uda says Northwestern Energy isn't his only obstacle. The Montana Public Service Commission often makes it hard for qualifying facilities as well. In fact, in 2020, the Montana Supreme Court ruled the PSC illegally tipped the scales against renewable developers. The case featured an embarrassing moment of Commissioner Bob Lake and a staffer caught on tape revealing how recent decisions would pull the plug on solar development. The recording, first reported by the Billings Gazette, reflects how changes to contract terms can kill projects.
It's going to probably kill QF development entirely.
Well, actually, the 10-year might do it, and if the price doesn't. And honestly, at this low price, I can't imagine anyone going to get into it.
No one.
So it becomes a totally moot point, because just dropping the rate that much probably took care of the whole thing. We're still live.
Yeah, but I think our mics are off, so we're okay.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Northwestern specifically, and the Public Service Commission, each has an obligation to encourage these projects, which they are not doing and have not done for a long time. And the only reason we've made progress is because we were willing to litigate it.
Can you explain some of the conflict that there's been at the PSC over the qualifying facilities?
Yeah, I think the issue has been both a question of need and a question of cost. And I mentioned earlier that we're long energy at times, and so do we need more of wind and solar when in fact customers have to pay for that? And so it's a function of need. Do we need all of these resources that are there's a queue of quite a few qualifying facilities. Do we need all of those resources? And if so, the cost structure associated with them, is it fair to customers? Because they are rising costs.
There is a sense in the state that Northwestern has actively opposed renewable projects here.
I've just added nearly 1,000 megawatts since 2011 and not added one fossil fuel resources. You must be reading the media.
Well, that's why we're here to set the
right,
record
and
straight.
it's frustrating. It's frustrating that we're at 60% carbon free. We're better than California. That's frustrating to me, that this state hangs on to one coal plant and one gas plant being built and ignores everything else. Ignores that our hydro system is more megawatts than those two facilities. It's frustrating for me.
The hydro system he mentions is the legacy Montana Power Company system that Northwestern bought about 10 years ago. Thanks to that addition, Northwestern's Montana portfolio is 69% carbon-free as of 2023. With the fossil fuel additions in the next couple years, that will drop to 56% by 2026. About half the renewables in its portfolio are from the QFs the company is required to accept.
But I will tell you, Stan, I certainly take credit for those contracts and our calculation of our megawatt hours. So they're part of our portfolio, those contracted resources. So I can't say all bad things about qualifying facilities and not also respect that we get benefits from the wind and solar in our megawatt hours in our profile.
Bird says one technology piece is missing for renewables to play a bigger role.
I would tell you that the future is long duration storage. That is the perfect complement to intermittent resources. If you can do that, you can keep adding wind and solar. We'll take more wind and solar if you can then store it for longer durations.
Bird says the utility is starting to take a closer look at options like pumped hydro, where water is pumped uphill when energy is abundant, and then flows downhill to spin turbines when it's needed. And for utility-scale batteries, today's varieties can only last a few hours at a time. Those that can last days are just now beginning to hit the scene. But UDA isn't convinced there's a need to wait for new technologies before kicking the carbon habit.
Yeah, I mean, I get their point of view, and I'm not even saying that everything they're saying is wrong. What I'm saying is, on balance, it really doesn't matter. I mean, the fact is, if we're going to transition to a different economy, we have to start somewhere.
I want to take action to protect the people and places that we love.
Billings architect and city council member Ed Gulig is someone who has heeded the call to climate action in his own life.
To address the climate crisis, we need to be working at a variety of scales. So I think as individuals, you make decisions about where you live, where your investments are going to be made.
For Gulig, that means energy efficiency upgrades for his home, and if you can believe it, doesn't own a car. Not happy with the pace of Northwestern's transition, he also put solar panels on his roof, but he recognizes there's only so much that individuals can do.
There's definitely more community-scaled action that's required. That means you need to have organized citizenry, typically, to bring those changes, or you have elected officials who are taking a leadership role.
Avora Glenn, with the city of Missoula, is working with Bozeman and Northwestern Energy on one community project right now.
Yeah, so the Green Power Program is really, the goal is to create a new utility-scale renewable energy project in Montana, and to enable regular residents, businesses, municipalities, like the city of Missoula, to subscribe on their electricity bills to that new renewable power.
The Green Power Program has been in the works for about 3 years, but in December they finally reached an agreement on the details. Missoula and Bozeman will choose the 100% green project, Northwestern Energy will finance it and own it, and ratepayers in those communities will have the option to pay an estimated 2% extra in their energy bills to support the renewable project.
You know, we need 100% clean electricity. We need it, like I said, like 50 years ago. So to me, it's the right thing to do. It's time, and I hope that we can continue working through this partnership to execute a program that's going to be extremely meaningful.
Those two communities, and I give them a ton of credit, they've set a very high target from a net zero perspective for their communities. The problem is, if certain customers don't want to pay more for that resource, they shouldn't have to. So how do we get customers to subscribe to pay more for their energy because they want it clean? If we can set up a structure like that, we'd be willing to put that in front of the commission and put forth a green tariff and help them build. They can decide. Do they want wind? Do they want solar? And so we're working with those communities to try and make something that works within the rules.
The initial project would be for 50 megawatts, but there's an option to build more projects and add more communities across Montana if there's enough demand.
It's not just us. This is a global commitment, but we definitely have to do our share. That's I think the big driver behind making that commitment, is we know it's what we need to do, and the bonus is there is so much research that shows us it's possible. We have really clear paths of how to meet that goal, even if it's ambitious, even if it's new.
I like to give Northwestern Energy the benefit of the doubt that they're approaching this honestly, that they really want to do the right thing and make it pencil out for everybody so it's feasible. I hope so. And that'd be an interesting then challenge to the public of, put your money where your mouth is sort of thing. People are concerned about climate. Okay, here's something you can do that's very tangible right off the bat.
For Impact, I'm Stan Parker.
Missoula and Bozeman constitute a large customer base for Northwestern Energy. They are second and third, respectively, behind Billings. Once the two communities have signed a binding agreement, it will go before the PSC for approval. If all goes to plan, they hope to have a utility-scale renewable project up and running as early as 2025. That's all the time we have for this episode. On the next Impact, the monopoly system for getting donated organs to the patients who need them is rife with inefficiencies, something that disproportionately affects rural states. We'll tell you what's being done about it. And in a follow-up to a story we brought you in November, we'll examine ongoing homelessness in Missoula. How has buy-in at the city and county level helped? Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next Impact.
Production of Impact is made possible with support from the Otto Bremer Trust, investing in people, places, and opportunities in our region. Online at ottobremer.org. The Greater Montana Foundation, encouraging communication on issues, trends, and values of importance to Montanans. And viewers like you who are friends of Montana PBS. Thank you.